Good afternoon, everyone. We are very happy to have you with us today, and apologies for a slight delay, but hopefully you still have time booked for us for today's Brussels talks. My name is Ewa Kocińska-Lange, and I'm running together with my team Brussels office of Polish National Center for Research and Development in cooperation with Business and Science Poland. And this is our monthly event that we organize for you, for RNA community in Poland and also beyond, also for our colleagues in other countries, to discuss hot topics here in Brussels. There are many of them, so I think that the monthly idea is quite okay. And today we are very happy and honored to have with us Mr. Jan Panek, who is the director of the Nuclear Energy Safety and ITER at the European Commission at DG dealing with energy. It is a hot topic, not only in Brussels, I think, at the moment, also in all our countries and actually globally. So again, thank you for accepting our invitation. Thank you for coming to our Brussels office. And well, before we will go into details, still a few technical information from my side. Please use the chat, and I'm now directing my message to all online participants to connect with us, to ask questions to Jan, to interact as much as possible. That's the whole idea. Of course, we will have a bit of introduction, and then we also prepared some questions together with my team, and they are also appearing on chat because you asked also your questions during registrations. But if you still have some others, please do use the chat and ask them. We will manage them in the course of the event, and for the rest, I think it's quite straightforward, this program to use. If you have some technical issues, also communicate them to us via chat. And yeah, for the technicalities, sorry, I think that's it. So we can go to the main topic, and we can discuss what's really happening in the field of nuclear energy, also, of course, in the field of research and innovation in nuclear energy, since this is our main topic of interest as the office here in Brussels. But we also have quite some questions dealing in general with the whole challenge of nuclear safety and also energy safety, with more widely these days, especially of course in the condition of unstable situation in the world caused by the war. Okay, but first I think what's crucial is to set the scene a bit, and for that we have a few slides from Mr. Panek, so we can go to them, I think. Yeah, I think my colleague is probably managing that, so maybe I will not interfere. Okay, fine. Yeah, so Janek, the floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you very much, Eva, and good afternoon, everybody. First of all, apologies for being late. I have warned the organizers that I may be running late, but nevertheless, I think apologies are due. I was in a ministerial discussion with the US and some member states and also some neighborhood countries on issues of nuclear and how they actually gain currency in the current context of the Ukrainian situation and the aggression of Russia on Ukraine, which, as you know, also has touched very directly some nuclear installations in Ukraine. So, in this context, we have just discussed with a number of countries, and that indeed has delayed my arrival here. But it was an important discussion to be had, so I hope that you will excuse me. It was an important discussion because last week the Commission came out with the second Repower EU communication, and as a deputy minister of one member state actually noted in the talk today, the word nuclear appeared 3 times in that communication, which the person mentioning that considered a breakthrough, because it is unusual. He mentioned that it was 3 references to nuclear and 66 to renewables. So I think it was all relative. But nevertheless, I think it's clear that we are witnessing a kind of a relook at nuclear by a number of member states. A number of member states who spoke today in the ministerial meeting actually referred to their plans to consider nuclear energy as an option for their future decarbonized energy mix. Countries that currently do not have installations. So I think we are seeing a shift or development in the field, but we know that nevertheless there are a number of ongoing processes and issues that we should not abandon, and if anything we should pursue ever further. So. My presentation in that regard is really going on the basics. It does not talk about the Repower EU. So if you are by now overwhelmed by all the information that has been bombarding you since last Wednesday, don't worry, I will not add more to that. I rather want to highlight some of the perhaps well-known facts, but those that actually underpin whatever future developments in nuclear in Europe we will see. At the moment, we have about 13 EU member states actually with nuclear power reactors. And altogether, they produce about a quarter of total electricity consumed in the EU. So that's an important contribution to security of supply as well as our decarbonization efforts. Altogether, these member states have over 100 functioning nuclear power reactors. And they together come to about 100 gigawatt of installed capacity. So indeed, it's a mighty force, and you can see that actually the countries with those reactors are sort of evenly spread geographically across the EU. So we do not have any north, south, east, west, small, big. Kind of situation. Obviously, the situation in individual member states is not the same. In some countries, in France, nuclear accounts for almost 3/4 of electricity of the electricity mix. For some, like the Netherlands or Germany, the numbers are much lower. But you can see in the list on the right that indeed there is a number of member states for whom actually nuclear is a significant source of electricity. So in that regard, it's very important that in the EU we do have a very robust regulatory regime that actually at EU level provides an overall regulatory framework for nuclear installations and for nuclear activities. I should say that the choice of each member state, whether they use nuclear energy or not, as you know, is fully with the member states, with the individual member states. The Commission is not engaged in neither promoting or discouraging the use of nuclear. You all know that this is a polarizing subject for both the general public and for individual member states. So the Commission stays strictly neutral on this. What we make sure is that those who actually decide to use nuclear energy do so in full compliance with the existing regulatory regime, which is set up so that it provides the assurance of safe and sustainable use of nuclear power, not only from the perspective of those who actually make the decision to exploit it, but also everybody else in Europe. The regulatory framework, I think, is known to all of you. It's composed of 3 main pillars: the Nuclear Safety Directive, which dates from 2009 originally, but which has been significantly revamped after Fukushima. Then the Directive on Spent Fuel and Waste Management, which takes care of the back end of the nuclear fuel cycle, and not only the fuel cycle, but also of all the assets. And then the Basic Safety Standards Directive, which is a bit more broader directive, which sets the basic standards for any consequences of the use of nuclear materials, also in non-power civilian uses. So it covers also situations where citizens are dealing with radioactivity in the context of medical applications, for example. There also the European legislation makes sure that the European citizens are not exposed unduly to radiation, and that actually all those using radiation in non-power settings take full respect of the consequences of radioactive ionizing radiation. So the role of the Commission primarily is to ensure that this full set of legislation, which is complemented by a number of additional pieces of legislation, recommendations as well, to make sure that this whole body is properly applied, and that if there is indeed a lack of compliance anywhere, that this is quickly improved on. Now, we can think, okay, fine. If this is the general conditions, if this is the general framework within which member states are making the decision whether to use nuclear energy or not, then what does the situation look like? Well, we got a very good opportunity to have a picture of member states' plans through the national energy and climate plans, which is a requirement. It is a requirement under the European the Energy Union legislation to adopt such plans. Member states, for the first time, were asked with the adoption of the governance of the Energy Union to prepare such plans and communicate them to the Commission, which by now they did. And from that, we see the picture as shown on the slide, where there are indeed some member states currently using nuclear energy, like Germany, like Belgium, that do not make medium to long-term plans for continued use of nuclear. On the other hand, there are some member states, like Poland, that actually declare clearly that they are looking at nuclear energy. They're looking at entering into the nuclear energy use as one opportunity how to reduce their carbon intensity of their economy and of their energy system. So we will see a shift in the coming years, probably in Europe, with some exits from nuclear and some new entrants. So by 2050, the picture may be very different from what we see now, but quantitatively, it could still be about half of member states, maybe just a bit less than half of member states that will be using nuclear power. What will substantially change is that in the decarbonized mix of the middle of the century, the share of nuclear, even though the number of gigawatts of installed capacity can be the same, the proportion of electricity coming from nuclear may be much smaller than what it is now. Instead of 25%, it may be 10 to 15%, depending on what models you look at. But that's because we should be going through significant electrification, a massive growth in the use of renewables. So we should see, according to these predictions of individual member states, nuclear become a complement to renewables. The renewables will be the backbone of the decarbonized energy system in the 2050s, with nuclear complementing at about 15%, as I said, 10 to 15%, depending on what models you look at. So in that regard, it's important to look at how actually can nuclear in reality fulfill that expectation of a number of member states. This will not happen. The reactors that will be operating in 2030 or 2050 will not be the same reactors that we see operating now, by and large. As you can see on this graph, the dark gray stacks actually show the phase out of the existing operating reactors. And as you can see, by 2030, 2035, we are likely to see very little of those. Some of them may remain nevertheless in the fleets of member states after LTOs, after long-term extensions of operations. But those obviously will be reactors with significantly upgraded features, with the additions of technologies and components that will reflect the latest available technologies at the time of the extension of the lifetime. And that obviously will require significant investments, according to the calculations that we've done in the last PINK report, which is a regular report that within a span of several years, the Commission publishes regularly, and looks there at the investment needs of the nuclear sector. So in the last PINK, in the period well before COVID, the estimate was that these LTOs would in total require about 50 billion euros. And then on top of the existing reactors with extended lifetime, the 30s, the 40s, the 50s should actually see a number of new builds according to plans of member states as communicated to us. You know that there are a number of projects already underway in several countries, and there are others, including, as I said, in currently non-nuclear member states that are being announced. So altogether, the PING gave us an estimate of about 450 billion worth of investments needed in new build. And again, those are numbers that by now may be actually quite outdated, in the sense that that the cost of everything has risen in the last couple of years. So it may well be that the investment needs will also increase. Now, how do we then get those investments into the energy system? Well, one important source of financing could be private capital. And in that regard, it was very important that the Commission sent a very clear signal through the Taxonomy Delegated Act earlier this year about the conditions under which investments in nuclear could be regarded as taxonomy compliant, i.e. falling in the sustainable investment category. As I said, we are not in the business of encouraging or discouraging the use of nuclear, but it is clear that we cannot accept any type of nuclear investment as contributing to the sustainability objectives. It's only the nuclear that actually correctly handles and addresses the challenges associated with nuclear technology that should be actually regarded as contributing to the long-term sustainability goals. What are those challenges? I think we all know that. Those challenges obviously refer to the need for continuous safety improvements. We cannot just take comfort from the fact that we have never had a massive scale nuclear accident of the type of Fukushima or Chernobyl in Europe, that in the EU. That obviously would be a very false complacency. It is important that we push the industry, but also the regulators, to continuously seek improvements and kind of question their daily practices all the time in order to stay ahead of the curve. The legislation, nuclear safety directive in particular, that I referred to earlier, is indeed devised in that spirit. It requires periodic safety reviews. It requires continuous attention to safety. But we also need to make sure that, therefore, indeed, the taxonomy compliant projects are those that have fully complied with those requirements. But we also want to make sure that the taxonomy compliant investments are those that actually respect the challenge of the back end, the fact that nuclear installations do produce nuclear waste, some of it long-lived, and that obviously needs to be disposed of in line with the best available solutions, most sustainable waste handling practices, including deep geological disposal. And as you know, the complementary delegated act sets clear requirements in this regard for any aspiring nuclear investment. I will not go into further details on the taxonomy, not on the sunset clauses. I'm sure you have all been far too often participating in discussions on these subjects, including the accident-tolerant fuel or the different generations of nuclear technologies, generation 2, 3, 3 plus, 4. So let's not go into it. We can perhaps return to it in the discussion. So as I said, even though we may be seeing some shifts or evolutions in the views of the public as well as policymakers on nuclear, it is important that we maintain a steady basis for the operation of nuclear installations in Europe based on the existing legislation. And there, as I said, the key considerations are first nuclear safety, and second, the handling of waste and of spent radioactive fuel. In nuclear safety, the two key legislations are the Nuclear Safety Directive and the Basic Safety Standards Directive, where on both we are currently in the process of compliance checks of the extent to which member states have actually been fulfilling the requirements that is set in those directives. They need to transpose those requirements in their national legislations in ways that are complete and comprehensive and effective. And that obviously requires quite a lot of comparative scrutiny of national legislation. So it takes time, but this is something that we are currently involved in. While in parallel, processes are underway to implement the specific provisions, particularly in the Nuclear Safety Directive, when it comes to topical peer reviews and the periodical exercises that aim at, as I was saying earlier, at making sure that everybody stays on their toes and does not get falsely satisfied or complacent about the fact that we have not seen a nuclear accident in Europe. We should also keep in mind the fact that nuclear technologies are not used only for power generation. They are also used in non-power applications, and particularly importantly in the medical sector. And there, again, not only do we need to apply properly, we need to make sure that the Basic Safety Standards Directive is properly applied also in those sectors, but we also need to look at how we are positioned in terms of technology development and in terms of security of supply for the use of ionizing radiation in medical. And last year, about a year ago, the Commission adopted a roadmap for working towards reinforcing the security of supply for medical radioisotopes, but also enhancing the research for non-power uses in Europe, and also developing ever improved quality standards for the use of radiation in medical applications, so that we make sure that patients that actually do need to receive the treatment consisting of radioactive doses actually receive only those types of doses and the level of doses that is required for their condition. That requires a further evolution of mindset, not only in the industry producing those technologies and those medical instruments, but also obviously in the medical profession itself, which is the one that actually decides on the use of those technologies. Now, while working on the continuous improvements of nuclear safety, we also need to continue pushing for ever improved ways of handling radioactive waste and decommissioning. It's clear that, as I was saying, some of the nuclear reactors that we see operating today are not the ones that will actually be bringing us to the decarbonized energy mix of 2050. So it's clear that they will have to be decommissioned in the coming decades, and we need to make sure that this is done with due respect to environmental concerns. We know from currently ongoing decommissioning projects that it is possible to actually decommission nuclear power plants with a high level of free release of material to the extent of upper 90s in percentage. There are very good practices that are being actually currently formed in some of the decommissioning projects, particularly in Slovakia, in Bulgaria, in Lithuania, where the EU is actually providing significant financial assistance, but also in other member states. And we need to make sure that these practices are becoming standards and are promoted throughout the EU. Equally for dealing with radioactive waste, we can see now 3 countries, Sweden, Finland, France, moving ahead with long-term disposal facilities for spent fuel and high-level nuclear waste, with different solutions, different geological and technological concepts in all 3 countries, but they are the harbingers of this important step forward, because until now the industry has been simply storing the high-level waste or partly reprocessing, and I think it's clear that as we move towards decommissioning of further installations, and as we see a longer-term use of nuclear in member states, it is important that this back-end question is also being resolved with effectiveness and with environmental responsibility. So with that, I will close. As I said, it was just a very quick overview of what we are doing and where we stand. But I'm sure that in the questions that will come up now, we will tackle all kinds of additional issues that I may not have mentioned or not necessarily in the right level of detail. But thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks a lot, Jan, for this overview. It's indeed a lot being discussed at the moment, quite some ambitious plans, and also it's actually quite difficult to choose questions. We have maybe a bit more than half an hour left, and quite some topics to be discussed. That's true. But okay, one after another. Let's start maybe with something more general. You actually gave us the picture of I would say of the ambitions of the EU in terms of in the field of nuclear energy, but we also know that the topic is quite difficult, and it was always a bit difficult. There were different interests from different member states, and the situation at the moment is even more challenging, because before the war, I think we all were thinking that nuclear is rather almost in the past. Of course, this is a bit of overstatement from my side, but that was more or less the direction. Now it's definitely not the case, and there's also a big question mark what will happen in the coming weeks and months, and in general the future. So my question would be, what's the approach and the idea behind facilitating member states discussions from those different points of interest and angles that every country has different characteristic, history, and infrastructure as well.
Yeah, well, as I said, look, we cannot be in the business of convincing. Well, let me say it this way: we see that people, member states, experts are split. Mm-hmm. Whether it's half and half, whether it's 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, doesn't matter. We have, the reality is that nuclear is a divisive subject. Some believe in it very strongly and want to continue using it, or even becoming newcomers to using it. Others are clearly not seeing it as the right way to go. We cannot be in the business of validating one or the other position, or trying to convince one half to cross and join the other half, whichever of the halves that would be. This is not what we are there for as the Commission. The Commission is there at the service of all of Europe. So our line is, given that there are some member states that continue using and will continue using nuclear, how do we make sure that this use is actually not detrimental to any other legitimate interests of EU public or EU member states, and that actually whenever nuclear is used, it is actually benefiting not only the ones that decides in favor of it, but in broader sense also everybody else through decarbonization effects, through industrial policy benefits, etc. So our ambition in this, I think, is rather pragmatic. And as I said, there are a number of developments that are actually in a way impartial to a decision of future use of nuclear. There are currently installations, they will need to be decommissioned. How do we make sure that they are decommissioned in a way that is least burdensome for the environment? And as I said, there are good ways, good examples to go by. And I could go on with other examples, but I think this is this is the gist.
Yes, the message is clear. Thank you. Then another question that came to our minds when we were preparing for the event is, of course, on one hand, a bit of urgency, or even more than a bit, as it comes to implementing Green Deal policy and going very proactive in that, and more ambitious and quicker in general. And on the other hand, when we think about nuclear energy investments, they are taking a lot of time. So how to combine those two difficult issues?
Yeah, so there again, like I was mentioning, decommissioning, for those that will continue using nuclear, it's clear that it has to be done on the condition of sustained attention to safety. So we will see nuclear investments taking time, and to the extent that it is because of the need to ensure the best use of technologies and the highest regard to safety, I think this is obviously let's say a price to pay. We have also seen that investments run into delays because of first of a kind nature of issues. Those again can be resolved through making sure that those who come after learn from the initial projects, not only in the sense of energy of nuclear safety, but also in terms of investment efficiency or the engineering efficiency, which obviously shortens time, and time is money. But I would caution against a rush that would actually try to make shortcuts or cut corners in the execution of the nuclear projects to the detriment of robustness, reliability, responsibility in the nuclear safety domain.
Okay. Good to know that safety is first. Now I think we can go to chat and see a bit the questions there. First, I will choose some questions that we received before the event from participants that were registering for it, and it's actually a bit linked still to what we just said, but going more into the general energy crisis. So, what's the position of the Commission towards in view of this?
Well, we have seen that a number of member states do invoke nuclear as a reliable source of energy that is allowing them to reduce their dependency on fossil fuels, also before the crisis, but now obviously even more with the crisis and with the need to quickly find alternative supplies of not coming from Russia for fossil fuels. There is a caveat in this that for some member states, also nuclear is a source of dependency on Russia because of the fuel for the reactors that is currently manufactured in Russia. It's predominantly the issue of those 5 member states that are using Russian-designed VVR reactors, but not only them. Also, other member states are partly currently relying on Russia to provide either fuel assemblies or at least the conversion or enrichment services that have to precede the manufacturing of fuel. And more important, and equally importantly, we see dependency on Russia also in the non-power sector. In the medical sector, you can, if you look at the at all the radioisotopes that are actually now used in medical, but also other than medical non-power uses, it's a phone book with a long list of those that come exclusively from Russia. So there we have a challenge that we need to tackle. And I was mentioning earlier today the Samira initiative, the action plan for increasing security of supply for radioisotopes, which was adopted 1 year ago. Its validity is now even reinforced by the considerations that I have just mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, it's not an easy situation, obviously. We have a question here also relating a bit more to the legal framework and going more into maybe some other ideas of harmonization of technical regulations that are applying to nuclear power. And the example is like it used to be done with petrochemicals for a few years ago.
That's a very good question. I think we have seen that first of a kind type of projects can run into unexpected issues which prolong the investment time. So it's in everybody's interest to actually avoid those. Higher level of standardization or harmonization of technical designs or technical specifications could obviously help to alleviate those risks. It's important that the recognition of the importance of such sort of common approach comes from within the industry, within member states. I don't think the Commission can successfully oblige the industry in this regard to use what immediately would be called one size fits all, etc. I think it has to be a genuine process, which should come from the recognition that it is the way to shorten the investment time and fast speed up the deployment of new projects. But I don't think it can come exclusively through a sort of top heavy approach.
Okay, I see. Now let's see questions popping up live from participants present with us, and there are a few. And maybe let's see the last one related to the safety issue. Some problem with the mouse. I don't know why. It should be fine.
Okay, so what does it say?
So that's the question that relates to the safety of nuclear installations in the potential area of conflict that we have now in Ukraine, but we can also have other risks like earthquakes and so on. So
So I think we have seen what happened in Russia is unprecedented. We have international regimes, treaties that actually recognize the special case of nuclear installations and the need that these cannot be used in the context of armed conflicts as sources of tactical or strategic advantage, etc. What we have seen in Ukraine is obviously practice by the invader to completely flout those requirements. We have to see whether the international regimes need to be therefore rethought and strengthened or maybe changed in that regard. That's one avenue, and in parallel, we obviously need to see how the design features of installations need to recognize the type of threat or risk that until now have been completely inconceivable. I think the situation in Ukraine obviously is very alarming. As you have seen, though, the system does have provisions to ensure that even under attack, those installations are able to operate. Whether their operation currently is done in the way that is desirable is a different story. But the fact is that technically those installations have been able to actually ensure operation and continuous safety, despite the unprecedented acts of physical interventions on the site, etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, okay, this is indeed quite terrifying for every single citizen to imagine just potential consequences. Okay, we have, I think, 2 questions. One was sent before, one is appearing now related to taxonomy that you mentioned. So let me just publish first one now that coming live. And it's related to the final position of the expert group on sustainable finance and the definition, let's say, of nuclear technologies in that in relation also to the do no significant harm rule.
So the complementary delegated act adopted earlier this year precisely addresses the conditions under which certain nuclear activities can be considered as compliant with the do no significant harm criteria. So not all nuclear activities, specific nuclear activities of extension, of new build, of refurbishment can be considered as compliant with the do no significant harm criteria under conditions spelled out in the delegated act, notably with respect to the use of technology. It has to be the highest, the latest safety available, so that actually complies with the requirements of the Nuclear Safety Directive. It has to be technology that is, or investment actually, activity that is properly notified to the European Commission under Article 41 of the Euratom Treaty, and that has been properly assessed by the Commission, and any comments have been reconciled. It has to be technology or it has to be an investment activity that foresees the handling of the back end, so makes the correct provisions during the operation of the investment, so that at the end of its lifetime, sufficient resources have been accumulated for the decommissioning and disposal of waste, and the solutions for such disposal need to exist in the given, or need to be accessible to the given country concerned. So there are all these criteria under which certain type of activities can qualify as do no significant harm. That's the proposal from the Commission. It is a proposal that integrates a lot of input from the technical expert group, but as you know, the technical expert group did not have exactly this opinion. The Commission deviated on the basis of input from other stakeholders and other experts as well, from some of the points on which the TAG had particular views. Now, the text as such was then consulted with member states and with the Parliament, further revised and adopted in February. It is now in the Parliament and in the Council for a scrutiny period that will, even if extended under the statutory provisions for its extension, will finish later this year in the summer, and then we will see whether the Council and the Parliament will actually allow the application of this complementary act, which would then become effective beginning of next year. The Parliament can block it by simple majority. Member states in the Council can also block it, but by a much higher, some sort of a super qualified majority. But everything is foreseen in the existing treaties as regards these processes, so we have to wait until they have come their course.
Okay, but at the moment there is a hope. We just have to wait. Let's say. Okay. We have some questions related to some innovations in waste, and I will maybe put both of them. So this is a more general one in terms of some innovations in the field of waste disposal. Mm-hmm. And there is another one a bit more detailed that came just now. About thorium-based nuclear plants that will reduce waste and use of water.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So on the waste issue, so indeed, waste is probably the driver of any public sentiments which are critical of nuclear or which see nuclear as undesirable source, and as we said, those exist in the European population, as exist the other views, and it is true that the principle of not burdening future generations with the legacy of waste from the current installations is well spelled out in EU legislation, but has yet not translated into concrete technological solutions or technical processes that would actually allow for a permanent disposal of waste, high-level waste. As I said, there are projects now in Finland, the most advanced, but also in Sweden, in France, to open the first permanent repositories of high-level waste. And those represent a very significant technological advancement. And I think that the one in Finland is nearly finished. So it should then become a source of knowledge and source of experience for all member states that will want to handle this in due course. In the reports under the Nuclear Waste Directive, member states have been obliged to report to us their plans for disposal facilities, but you may know the plans have been published, or the report on those has been published. So for a number of member states, the time horizon has been quite long. Mm-hmm. There are member states that plan to have disposal facilities only in the second half of this century, for example. I think that is not really the right approach. We've been critical of those approaches to the extent that the legislation allows us, and we hope that the first comers of Finland, Sweden, France will actually provide perhaps incentives or stimulus for member states to review such longer far-fetched plans. There are also technological advancements in the handling of lower intensity waste, lower level waste. There are numerous. We don't have to go into those, but I would like to highlight, for example, the practices that are being applied successfully in the decommissioning projects in Slovakia and in Bulgaria. As I mentioned, we provide from EU budget significant support to those decommissioning activities, and there they are using very encouraging approaches. In Bulgaria, this entails a plasma melting facility that can actually reduce significantly the volume of waste. In Slovakia, the approach is a bit different, but there again, they achieve very high percentage of free release of the material from those installations in the lower level waste category, and all those are very encouraging and should be pursued further. The question that is asked about the thorium-based nuclear plants, in a way links to this, because there are indeed technologies, fourth generation technologies, that would actually do away with the issue of high-level nuclear waste by functioning on the basis of a closed fuel cycle. Those are technologies that are being researched quite extensively. There are a number of avenues. Europe is supporting about half of those through various means, because we see them as a way of actually tackling the waste issue. But I think none of them is yet ready for deployment Nevertheless, in the Taxonomy Act, one of the activities that is considered as potentially compliant with the do no significant harm criteria is indeed type of research or investment in the development of technologies that would present the closed fuel cycle solution.
Okay. Thank you for this answer. Our original time is coming to an end, but I hope we can still use a bit of time that we have here, like 5 minutes maybe. And there's a topic that's actually quite vividly discussed recently, at least small modular reactors. And there is a question related to ambitions of the International Atomic Energy Agency and the plans that maybe the Commission has, maybe a bit similar, maybe not, maybe something else in relation to that, because there's quite some interest from different member states to maybe invest in these ones. And also, I've seen that last week there was a report published by the Commission after some discussions with high-level experts at the Nuclear Energy Roundtable, with some recommendations going directly into SMRs. So, if you could say a bit more about this this topic, it would be great.
Yeah, SMRs is sort of the new kid on the block. A lot of expectations, a lot of promise. It is indeed an interesting concept that could offer solutions to a number of member states, including those who are not currently using nuclear. Unlike the large-scale installations, SMRs offer more versatility that could also see use of nuclear energy for the purposes of industrial and residential heating, but also production of hydrogen. It's an interesting concept, which indeed is attracting the attention of a number of member states and of European industry. The IAEA, and it's not so only in Europe, and this is why the IAEA is actually paying good attention to it. We have a number of SMR projects or developments in North America, both in the US and in Canada, but also in Japan, in Korea, also in countries like Argentina, for example. There is also an interesting SMR design being developed there. So it's not a surprise that the IAEA is looking into it and is looking at how can the current practices and current experience from the existing regulatory regime be leveraged and used as a source of inspiration or basis for a regulatory regime that should govern the use of SMRs, given that they will be nuclear but different. But I think in Europe we are not behind. The question is whether the Commission is planning something similar. Well, actually, the Commission, but also the European nuclear industry, the utilities have been working on SMRs and on these issues that the IAEA picked up already for some 2 or 3 years. The industry is now working very closely with the regulators and with the utilities and the research community on something called European SMR Partnership, where through joint work between industry, utilities, regulators, policymakers, we could see first SMR reactors in Europe taking off the ground at the beginning of next decade. This would offer interesting opportunities also for European industry, and obviously, therefore, is not something that we should ignore. We work very closely with these stakeholders in the context of the SMR partnership, and let's see what the preparatory work currently underway yields in terms of a concept for the development for the EU-wide development of these technologies and their possible deployment. And then I think the Commission will be in better position to judge to what extent this can actually become a true European, in the sense of EU institutions, initiative. I think it's too early for that, but we are certainly very closely involved and want to see how the potential of SMRs can actually be elaborated for the benefit of European energy industry and industry at large.
Okay, thank you. One more topic, few questions coming related to Euratom. We are at the office here basically mostly busy with Horizon Europe, but of course we have Euratom on our agenda as well. And one question is related here to fusion.
Yes.
So it's the famous ITER and the ambitions of that, but we also have a bit more general question that we were just thinking what would be the greatest research innovation challenge for Euratom at the.
And I'm glad that at least for the last question I get something on fusion, because as you were introducing me in the beginning, indeed my portfolio includes nuclear energy safety and ITER. And ITER is the flagship of fusion development, not only in Europe, but worldwide. So fusion is indeed a promising technology, very different from the traditional nuclear technologies, which are based on fission processes. Fusion is quite the opposite. It's about fusing small, simple elements, nuclei, into bigger ones, and thus obtaining energy. It's an elusive concept that has seen decades of investment of development and a number of breakthroughs, but we are still not there for using this process as a source of energy or for production of electricity. But indeed, EU is at the forefront of those development, has been for decades. Fusion will not deliver decarbonized energy mix by 2050. It cannot do so. We are, although very advanced and after decades of research, still nowhere near an immediate practical deployment of fusion for energy production. If everything goes well in the ITER project and in all the corollary fusion projects, both in the EU and elsewhere in the world, then perhaps by mid of the century we could start seeing ways to preparing for commercial deployment of fusion, but it will not deliver the decarbonized mix by 2050. What it can do, however, is to help sustaining the decarbonization in the later parts of the century, because it's clear that we need to deliver decarbonization by 2050 by all possible means, but some of them will be very costly. They are nevertheless important and inevitable because we cannot allow further heating of the planet. But it doesn't mean that in 2050 we will say, okay, fine, we are decarbonized and now nirvana. No, we will need to make sure that we continue actually deploying the most efficient and financially or economically advantageous technologies for sustaining decarbonized production of electricity and energy in general. And fusion could be one of those solutions for the later part of the century.
We have another question. It's a bit long, but so we need a bit more time maybe to digest it. But it's also related to the to Euratom, more detailed work program that is coming, and the possibilities of potential increase of priority of what we just mentioned, including SMRs and generation 4 and so on, in the funding and in the future funding. And also, how about the development of nuclear technologies in terms of hydrogen production, cogeneration, regeneration? And the last part is some kind of link between hydrogen production using nuclear technologies.
So apart from the substantial further commitment to ITER that the EU has decided in the current multi-annual financial framework, where about 6 billion euros are reserved for continued participation of Europe in ITER, or Euratom in ITER, there is also a significant allocation of funds under the Euratom Research and Training Program, focused primarily on safety issues, improvements of safety of existing installations, further development of technologies that will address favorably safety needs, but the same also for waste. In addition to that, we also see that in some of the other programs under the existing Horizon framework, funds can be actually used for example, medical applications of radioisotopes. I think this is also one of the issues mentioned in the questions. So I think there are funds available. Let's make sure that they are being used in the best possible way. Rather than asking for more money, I think we need to make sure that the money is being spent in a way that really moves us forward on all those axes: safety, sustainability of waste handling, security of supply for medical radioisotopes, safe and sustainable use of radioisotopes in other applications, other non-power applications. I think that for me would be the way forward. And okay, if then we still see that there is not enough money, then this is a lesson for the next period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, indeed. We have quite some programs available, including mentioned Horizon Europe, that's also contributing partly to this field, especially in the parts of the program that are bottom up. And then there's a potential, and it's also already happening, for example, to fund also Marie Skłodowska-Curie fellowships in the field of nuclear energy, and is also contributing to raising a bit this topic and putting it high on the agenda, as well as finding some synergies between the program itself and some other strategies. Like
that's also important. Yes.
Yeah, like you mentioned a few times, applications in medicine. So we have also EU beating cancer plan, and we have emission cancer, and nuclear energy is quite important for that as well. Okay, I think we could continue for another hour at least. There are quite some topics still here and also on my list, but the time is up. So thank you very much for coming to us, for joining our event, and for answering all those questions. And also thanks a lot to the participants for joining us this afternoon, and for being active, for sending questions. I hope we managed to answer at least most of them. If you still have some doubts or additional questions, you can contact us by email, of course. And yeah, I think for now that will be it. And of course, the Brussels series will continue next month with a different topic. So stay tuned, and see you at our other events. Thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you. Bye.